Hey, sir. See, you got here for me. I never thought I heard him ask me any water or anything. Yeah, no.
In May 2023, a popular Redditor was being questioned by police in Liberty County, Georgia. He was being questioned about what happened to his wife, Mindi, whose remains had been found not just in one field, in many fields.
I've been doing this 28 years. I don't watch a lot of them, but a lot of people watch TV shows and stories. Read a lot of books that have these kind of stories in them. You have characters that you've envisioned and made in your stories, and some of your stories, but none of your stories before a jury in Georgia are going to go. I want you to understand that up front. It's a very clear picture.
Nicholas Kassotis was famous online after a story he published on Reddit went viral, and the rights to that story would be purchased by Sony, who were planning on turning it into a movie.
This isn't make-believe, this isn't a story. This isn't one of your Reddit stories. This is real life. Yes, sir. And unfortunately, in real life, people do bad things to other people.
However, the real story of Nick Kassotis is wilder than anything he could publish online. Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this whole video, we're gonna look at the story of Nick Kassotis, aka Nick Morfox, aka many other names. A man on the run, while at the same time becoming famous online, and all the while hiding a horrifying secret. But before we get into all of that, please subscribe to see new stories for the dark every single week. Now, you and I, let's give it a go. It was December 2nd, 2022, deep in the woods of rural Georgia, near the small town of Riceboro, not far from Savannah. It was a bitterly cold day. The wind was racing through the dead trees. The first weekend in December was a big hunting weekend. A lot of hunters in those woods at the height of deer season. The hunting club active in those woods was a dog hunting club. They used dogs to herd the deer so they could be shot. But this day, the hunting dogs were acting off in those woods and fields. Something was wrong with the dogs. They weren't responding to hunters' calls and recalls. After one hunter had shot a buck, the dogs were hanging around the buck's body, but they weren't coming back to the hunter. The dogs were not only interested in the dead deer, but close by, it seems like they had found something else. One of the hunters went over to see what had gotten the dogs in such a state where they weren't even responding to their calls. And what he found just off the path in those woods was quite simply horrifying. A human torso. No legs, one arm, no head. A female torso. The hunters returned to town and called the authorities, and police arrived to those woods at around 5 p.m, December 2nd. As the crime scene was set up, soon found was a bloody knife with cleansing wipes around it, a plastic tub, likely used to transport the torso, and soon, more body parts scattered over a 3-mile radius in those woods. The next day, a leg, another tub. 2 days later, another leg. Eventually, a head, buried in the dirt. The medical examiner would determine from fractures in the skull that the likely cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, that they had been beaten to death before being dismembered and then dumped in those woods, and that the body had been there for less than a week before the hunting dogs found her. The medical examiner couldn't determine the exact cause of death because he found no neck, so therefore he couldn't say if she had been strangled or anything else.
The Liberty County Sheriff's Office is working in collaboration with the McIntyre County Sheriff's Office and the GBI on the investigation. Investigators hope that this most recent sketch of the unidentified woman will help bring some light to the case. According to deputies, hunters found the body in the area of Barrington Ferry Road and Jones Road in Liberty County near the McIntyre County line.
Trying to determine the identity of who they had just found would be even harder. The body was naked, with no clothes or anything to help identify. The fingerprints did not match anything in the systems. They tried to track her identity via teeth, but it was a dead end. Her DNA was also not in the system. Police, they did sketches, which they released to the public. Do you know who that is? They constantly put it in the news asking for help in identifying who this Jane Doe was. Eventually, the investigators tried to find her identity using genetic genealogy. Perhaps they could find relatives of this victim. This eventually led them to the victim's mom, Betsy Mebane, who lived only in South Carolina, finally revealing the identity of the victim, Mindi Kassotis. But who had done this to her? Well, the thing was, no one could have guessed that this horrifying story of this body found in the woods would be linked to another story, horror story as well, that had been posted on Reddit. A story that was going to be a major motion picture. And it would also lead to a man whose horror writing would only be eclipsed by his horror actions. Almost 4 years before that body was found in the woods, on January 7th, 2019, a story was posted on the No Sleep subreddit. No Sleep is a place for writers to post fictional horror stories that can oftentimes blur the lines between fact and fiction. This particular post was titled, "My mother-in-law was poisoning me, then I found out why." It quickly gained traction on Reddit, going viral within just a few hours of posting. This is that story, or at least the short version of it. No spoilers, but I doubt they're going to be making a movie out of this now. Everyone has their own nightmare-in-law story, though I couldn't imagine how bad mine would be. As it turns out, the worst thing wasn't my mother-in-law poisoning me, the worst thing was why she did it. I met Craig on one of my rare vacations, and we had sort of a whirlwind relationship. We fell hard for each other, and were married in a courthouse wedding within 2 months without ever meeting each other's families. Mine visited a few weeks later, and after their initial shock, really liked Craig. While we got moved in together and figured out married life, I got to hear more about his parents, who lived near the rest of his extended family a few hours away. The story then goes on to say that this main character eventually meets Craig's family and his parents, and everybody is absolutely thrilled to meet this main character, except her new mother-in-law, Betsy. She was cold and distant, and could sit there without saying a single word to me. It was creepy, but I kept trying to spark up conversation. On our last day, he announced that we should take an afternoon hike up into the national park their house sat on the edge of. Betsy made lunch, and I was changing to go out when it hit me. Just waves of nausea. I wound up in the bathroom for hours that afternoon. This then happens a few more times, always in the presence of Betsy. Whenever Betsy made dinner, Betsy makes lunch. Even one time, this main character goes to make their own food, leaving Betsy alone with the drink, and she still gets sick. She believed that Betsy was poisoning her. I was so sure his mom was poisoning me, and I confronted Craig about it. I told him I wouldn't visit his family again if she was there. It was our first big fight, but he finally said he wouldn't force me to visit. The next time I got off, we decided we'd head to that little cottage we'd rented before and not been able to use. We were driving right past his family's place, and it seemed rude not to stop, so we compromised and bought some pizzas. We got in and threw pizza on our plates when one of his cousins arrived, and everyone briefly left the food unattended. I realized my mistake almost immediately and decided to try an experiment. Craig and I both had 2 slices, so I switched our plates while everyone was in the next room. Craig was so sick, I was really worried about him. We had been back home for 3 days before I broke down and told him I'd switched the plates. I've never seen such anger before. He threw me over the couch, but I somehow managed to grab my keys and phone and ran out the door, not even wearing shoes, finally turning my phone off after I missed his 47th call. It was 2 days before I turned my phone back on, and when I heard the message from the police, I drove upstate immediately. Craig was dead. Betsy had shot him after he broke into her house and charged at her with a knife. I learned that Craig had been married once before, and his wife had died on a tragic hiking accident. Craig made a lot of money in the life insurance payout, and Betsy always suspected that Craig had killed her, and was nervous about letting him be alone with me, especially out in the remote area he was so familiar with from his childhood. So she ensured that every time he planned an outing, that I would be sick. It wasn't easy, but she didn't think I would believe her, as no one else had ever shared her suspicions about Craig. I found out the life insurance policies he took out on me without my knowledge afterward. I still visit her from time to time when I need to get out of the city. I love her cooking. Alright, enough of that, thought that would never end. A couple of years after this post, which took the internet by storm, Sony's 3000 Pictures, which is one of Sony's smaller production companies, which works on focusing on novels and literary work and making them into movies, it bought the rights, the film rights, to that very story you just heard. I'm not sure why, because it wasn't very good. But Redditors thought it was the bee's knees, the dog's bollocks, and clearly Sony did too. Sony, makers of the Emoji Movie, Sausage Party, and Morbius. So whoop-de-doo. If they sign it, you know it's shite. The author of the story was ecstatic in the Reddit post about the deal. The person behind the post was NM Rights, going by the name Nick Morefox, an extremely active user in the no sleep community. In a self-described biography on Amazon, Nick Morefox is a horror writer, voracious reader, and decent cook. A veteran, Nick loves wild places, cozy towns, the Oxford comma, and stories where the dog survives. Born in Glasgow, Scotland, Nick was raised in New England, and after stints in the Mid-Atlantic, the Middle East, Latin America, and Europe, now resides in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The real identity behind Nick Morefox was Nick Kassotis, husband of Mindi Kassotis. Like almost everything about Nick Morefox, that biography on Amazon was also almost complete fiction. Nick Kassotis, Nick Morefox, Nick was born in New Hampshire, rural New Hampshire, back in 1982. He doesn't always have a face like a slapdarse. There's just almost no pictures of him from before. Well, we'll get to it. After going to college in Boston, he got his JD, which is like the graduate entry law degree. And from there, Nick entered the military. He became a JAG officer in the US Navy, which is basically a military lawyer. He was deployed twice, was based in various locations around the world before finally going to work at the Pentagon, and that was when he married his first wife, Heather, in 2009. Nick's first marriage to Heather, though it didn't last very long, it seems that they were just not very well matched. There was accusations of infidelity on both sides, and Nick was deployed a lot, which really didn't help. And by 2015, the divorce was finalized and kaput. It was soon after that Nick met his second wife, Mindi Kassotis. Nick and Mindi met on the dating website OkCupid. They were both 33 years old at the time and seemed to hit it off from the very get-go. Mindi worked in a sort of similar field to Nick, in law firms and private foundations in Washington, D.C. They seemed like an ideal pairing. You got a decorated JAG officer Nick, ambitious Mindi, and within a few weeks of meeting each other, they could see themselves building a life together. Just a little over a year after first meeting, Nick and Mindi married, October 9th, 2016. They built that life together. Nick eventually left the military, staying with the Department of Navy, but in a civilian capacity. And finally, Nick could indulge in his hobby, which was writing horror fiction. This is when the Nick Morefox NM Rights identity emerged. He wrote story after story, each of which was well received within the community. Eventually, in 2019, his breakout story was posted. My mother-in-law was poisoning me, and then I found out why. However, this is when the strange story gets even, much stranger. See, Nick couldn't just, write horror fiction. He could live it, too. While Nick and Mindi's relationship was described as happy, they were well matched together, they had a real nice happy life in Washington, D.C., strange things started to happen around their home.
She started noticing odd deductions from our accounts that weren't tied to anything that we were doing. Sometimes they seemed to be, the ones she showed me were, they didn't even have transaction numbers. It would just say something like payment and, hundreds of dollars would go missing. At the time, we thought it was an error with our bank.
Money began to disappear from their bank accounts. Vandals started harassing the couple's home. Broken windows, slashed tires. Someone was out to get them, to possibly hurt them for some unknown and terrifying reason. But why? That was the question they were unable to answer.
I would sometimes get anonymous emails stating, that I was going to be hurt or killed. Our mail would go missing, things of that nature. Nails in our tires, a broken window. I mean, we wouldn't even move our cars some days, and it would have a new hole in the tire.
It eventually got so bad, this harassment by peoples unknown and their bank accounts being drained, with the local authorities seemingly unable to help them out. This eventually led to Nick contacting the FBI, who he had worked with before when he had been in the military. And that eventually led him to getting into contact with an FBI agent named Jim McIntyre. This agent, McIntyre, would be the one who would take a look into finding out who was harassing them, stalking them, cyber stalking them as well.
He seemed very thorough, very professional. He wanted to know everything that had happened. He wanted copies of the emails that we had received. He wanted specific issues with the banks. Mindi believed that she had seen a badge, or she told me at the time that she'd seen a badge. I had no reason to doubt that he was who he said he was. It didn't cross my mind that somebody else could have shown up at my house at that time. I did not see anything that caused me to question that he was who he said he was. And I thought we were lucky. I said many times how lucky we were.
After a few months' investigation, Agent McIntyre told the Kassotis couple that they were being targeted by an overseas gang of cyber terrorists, who were not only hacking their bank accounts, stealing money, but also physically harassing them. Again though, why they were being targeted, no one knew. As time went by, Jim became a bigger and bigger fixture in the couple's lives. He was not only like this guardian angel who was investigating this mysterious gang who was out to harass and target the Kassotis couple, he would also just became a trusted friend. He would give them marriage advice, just personal life advice. He eventually even gave Nick Kassotis a new job, working for this company called Apis Limited. Now, however, Nick was strangely not paid in cash for his new job with Apis Limited. He was paid in stock options, which, though, when this Apis Limited company got some kind of licensing deal done, his stock options just hit the roof. He was suddenly a multi-millionaire overnight. Nick's stock was suddenly worth millions, which was much needed, as every time they put money into their bank accounts, it would just be drawn by these criminals who were targeting them.
I wasn't getting paid by this company. I was paid only in stock options, and I was told that this large sum of money was being given to me. I believe this was late 2018. Honestly, it felt kind of like a lottery ticket. It was something that I had never expected, but we had real issues with getting a large chunk of money because we couldn't put a couple $100s into our account without it going missing within a matter of minutes, if not hours.
Nick was also in dire need of money due to his first wife, Heather, claiming he was not living up to the financial obligations he had agreed to as part of their divorce. With this windfall of money, Nick offered to pay Heather $1.5 million to settle things once and for all. However, while financially things were looking good, the vandalism and threats to their homes only escalated, to the point that Agent McIntyre advised them to leave home. And so, they began moving from rental place to rental place.
The year 2018 into early 2019, a lot had happened. In May, we were told to leave our house. He said that there were arrests being made and that there was nobody. It was a holiday weekend, I believe it was Memorial Day weekend, and that he was worried we would not be safe if we stayed there, that somebody might do something rash. Things continued. If anything, it picked up pace, the money disappearing, the issues with our bank accounts, the issues, with emails, mail, vandalism of our house. So we were in contact with Mr. McIntyre, or man we knew as Mr. McIntyre again, and he started looking for other suspects. He said at that time it was clear that somebody else was doing this, and he was casting a wider net.
However, that only made things worse. Nick claimed he was physically attacked, beaten with a baseball bat, but he never saw the identity of his attacker. It seemed like the Kassotis couple, who truly began to fear for their lives, believed they were being gang-stalked by everybody around them. It had started with their bank accounts being drained, then vandals. Now they are being physically attacked. Nick was lucky to escape with his life.
At that time, he had told me that I was being targeted by by members of my family, most specifically my father, Wayne Kassotis. He said that if we stayed in one place too long, that we might be found, that it was dangerous. I was frankly terrified.
As 2019 turned to 2020, Nick and Mindi were constantly on the move, and that was when Nick gave to Jim McIntyre access to everything. Bank accounts, social security, literally everything to try and just save their lives at this point.
I gave Jim McIntyre access to literally everything. I believed because of the investigation and that it was necessary. Financials, my bank accounts, my email accounts, my social media accounts, absolutely everything. And so did Mindi. I believe that he was protecting us because of this investigation.
All the while they were on the run from, they didn't even know what, Nick continued to post short stories on Reddit, seemingly drawing inspiration from his own real-life case of mysterious stalkers.
We never knew when we would move. We never knew when we would move out. Sometimes we would be in a place for 6 or 7 weeks. Those were rare but wonderful, and sometimes it would be every 2 or 3 days. Sometimes with literally an hour to pack. He would say, "You have to be out of the house in an hour."
Eventually, they moved in with Mindi's family in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and they ultimately stayed there for almost a year and a half. However, when Mindi's family decided to sell the family home they were living in, they moved to a rental in Savannah, Georgia, late 2022. It was then that Nick and Mindi discovered that Mindi was pregnant. However, it was an extremely difficult pregnancy for Mindi. She was in and out of the hospital with various issues constantly. Now, whether the pregnancy was so difficult because of all the stress of being stalked by mysterious attackers, hackers, terrorists, all of that, or it was some other issue, we don't know. But it couldn't have been easy when you were constantly in fear for your life. However, it was November 23rd, 2022, that when Nick, he was out of their apartment, looking around for different rentals in Savannah, Georgia, that he got a text from Mindi saying that she was leaving their apartment and going to a birthing center as she felt something was wrong with her body. Now, Nick already knew this was very strange. I mean, that's a scary text to get regardless. But Mindi was terrified to leave the house by herself. Nick then contacted Jim, who was their guardian angel and who was basically in full control of their lives at this point, asking him what to do. Jim told Nick not to go to her. Don't go to her, it's not safe. It was over a week before Nick finally went to that birthing center, or it was a small hospital, really, where Mindi was taken. And it was there that Nick was told by a doctor that Mindi had suddenly and tragically passed away. She was already cremated by the time Nick found out.
And he sat me down and said, "I'm very sorry to tell you that Mindi passed away very suddenly today." I mean, Betsy, I walked in and Betsy said, "Oh my God, is it the baby?" Like she could just see from my face that something was horribly wrong, and I started sobbing. I contacted Jim, I believe, shortly thereafter, and told him what had happened, and he said that he would find out what happened. He said he was so sorry for me. And then I think I got drunk.
After informing Mindi's heartbroken parents that they didn't even have like a grave or the urn, this was a shock to them as it was to literally everybody. They would say that was the last time they saw Nick Kassotis. He promptly vanished after that. It was around that same time that Mindi's dismembered body was found in the woods outside of Savannah, Georgia.
Investigators are continuing their search for answers after hunters found a woman's body in the woods near Riceboro on December 2nd. Members of law enforcement still haven't been able to identify her yet, but the Georgia Bureau of Investigation has released this sketch of what they believe the woman looked like.
As I said, Nick couldn't just write horror fiction. He could also live horror fiction, because that entire story I just told you was all a fabulous creation of Nick Kassotis. There is no evidence that Jim McIntyre, Apis Limited, or any of it ever existed. Nick and Mindi had been moving around a lot for years. They had been on the run, alright, but not from any mysterious stalkers, hackers, cyber terrorists. There's no evidence any of that was ever happening. Ever. The real reason they were on the run, it was discovered, was that Nick was trying to escape the obligation of paying his ex-wife, his first wife Heather, $1.5 million. So they were constantly on the run to escape that debt he owed. Whether Mindi was aware of that or not, we don't know. There's never been any proof that Jim McIntyre, Apis Limited, or cyberstalkers ever existed outside of Nick Kassotis' imagination. They had lived with Mindi's family for a long time, and they would say that they believed them to be in hiding. They believed Nick's story. Betsy, Mindi's mom, would say that Mindi was so scared she refused to leave the house, while Nick worked on the computer all day, likely working on short stories, that is. Everyone has their own nightmare-in-law story, though I couldn't imagine how bad mine. Had Nick successfully convinced Mindi that they were being stalked, harassed, and that Mindi actually believed that Agent Jim McIntyre was real the entire time, he had gaslit his own wife into believing all of this shit. Nick really wanted to take his horror fiction writing to the next level, and he believed his own bullshit. When, in May of 2023, Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents knocked on Betsy Mebane's door, she got quite the shock, as she believed her daughter had passed away from complications due to pregnancy, and had been cremated. Now, she was being told her daughter's dismembered body had been found in the woods. The agents then began to question Betsy on her daughter's husband. What was he like? And where was he? And Betsy would say she hadn't seen Nick since around the time when she believed Mindi passed away, late November, December 2022. But then she would say in January of 2023, so just a couple of months before the agents were questioning her, she said she got an anonymous call that Nick Kassotis had died in a car crash. So not only was Mindi dead, Nick was now dead too, allegedly. Betsy was also informed that Mindi wasn't pregnant at the time of her death, and Betsy had been spending a lot of time with Mindi due to these complications. It's just one lie after another. Was Mindi lying about being pregnant? Did Mindi believe she was pregnant when she wasn't? This story, it's hard to tell what's true and what's not. This entire real life case reads like a no-sleep story. It didn't take authorities long to track down a very much alive Nick Kassotis. Oh, Nick, you're supposed to write the stories, not eat them. Friggin' Forrest Gump over here was now going by Nicholas Killian James Stark, and had a new wife. He was on his third wife, name of Samantha Kolesnik. They married April 21st, 2023. Nick Kassotis truly wanted everybody to believe that he was dead and that he was starting a new life. Likely because he had just murdered somebody and was also on the hook for $1.5 million. Nick's third wife, Samantha, was also a horror writer. More established though than Nick, she had actually published novels and appeared in literary magazines. They had met through horror writing. He had started DMing Samantha on Twitter before Mindi was murdered. Nick telling Samantha that he was a widow back then, before he was actually a widow. And Nick swiftly moved in on her after Mindi was murdered. Murdered by him. The evidence against Nick was very strong. CCTV had caught Nick's vehicle in the area where Mindi's body would be found, the same time it's believed her body was dumped. Nick had conveniently put his phone in airplane mode while he was driving around these woods, likely dumping his wife's dismembered body. He put his cell phone in airplane mode as he likely believed that they would be able to track him by his location signal if it wasn't in airplane mode. But what he didn't know was that when you connect your phone to your car's Bluetooth, to listen to music or make calls via your car's system, that still tracks your GPS signal. So they could clearly see where Nick was at that exact moment, driving that exact car. He was also seen on CCTV purchasing the knife, tubs, items found at the crime scene. Mindi's blood would also be found in the Airbnb they had been staying at in Savannah, Georgia. She had likely been murdered as she lay on the futon.
We had weird things that we've been asked to do before before we moved locations and things like that, and I assumed it had something to do with that.
All right. Did you kill your wife?
No, sir.
Okay.
I swear to God, I never would.
When was the last time you saw your wife?
I saw my wife on Saturday, the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
You did not kill your wife.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
No, sir.
When Nick was questioned by police about the murder of his wife Mindi, he told them the exact story I just told you about Jim McIntyre, about Apis Limited, about the couple being on the run from stalkers, being gang-stalked by whoever, by this mysterious group who was out to get them, of them fearing for their lives. But when the police asked, good story, do you have any proof of that? Shit, I don't actually have any proof at all. But it happened, I swear, on the Bible.
Sir, I'm being 100% truthful with you. Sir, yes, I am. Sir, I did not hurt my wife.
No. Did you dispose of her?
No, sir.
You did.
No, sir.
And all evidence is showing that.
Sir, I
And
never.
your elaborate 2 hours of story that you gave in Pennsylvania, you know how many items, you being an attorney, you should realize how many of those can be disproven.
Sir, I have not lied to you at all.
You've been living the web of lies for a long time. Jim McIntyre,
I think Jim has lied to me for a long time. I do believe that.
I don't believe Jim exists.
Sir, Jim absolutely exists. I don't know if that's his real name, but he absolutely exists. I mean, the things that we did for years, the places we went,
You did to get away from the judgment from Heather.
no, sir.
So you didn't know you were wanted and on the run from Heather and the judgment, the civil judgment.
No, sir. Jim told me that I've been taken care of.
How did Jim take care of that?
I don't know, sir.
If Jim was so good at his job of protecting you, why would he not protect her? Why would he not come forward with any evidence now?
I don't think Jim was telling you the truth about anything.
Because he didn't exist.
He did exist, sir. We did everything we did everything for years.
Is you're being set up, is what you're saying?
I don't know, sir.
So are you alleging that Jim killed your wife?
I don't know, but I think it's possible.
Okay.
The investigators were unable to back up or find any information that any of his story was true. There was no Jim McIntyre. Never had been. Nick couldn't produce an iota of proof that any of his story was based in reality.
She was not pregnant at the time of her death.
So she was.
She was not. That's a medical certainty. She was not pregnant. The doctors that you're saying that she went to, that just you don't know their names, don't know the location.
And a funny little twist, the news of Sony purchasing the film rights to My Mother-in-Law Was Poisoning Me, then I found out why, came out on almost the same day Nick was being interviewed by the police, which was also about 1 month after he married his third wife, Samantha Kolesnik. By the way, Sony paid him about $300,000 for the film rights to his Reddit story, so he thought he was home free. Again, I'm not sure why they paid him that much, because it wasn't very good.
Why did you kill Mindy?
Sir, I didn't kill Mindy.
You killed Mindy.
I did not.
All the evidence shows that you killed Mindy, and will continue to show. It's kind of like a 1,000-piece puzzle. You burned some of the pieces. You've thrown some of the pieces away. We'll never have all the pieces. It's very clear. You made that absolutely sure we won't have the pieces. The big question is why. It's no longer if.
Sir,
The big
I
question.
never hurt Mindy.
The big question is why.
Sir, I never hurt Mindy.
You never carried her to the doctor. She never went to the doctor. You never went to the doctor. You know, your story is just so unbelievable. Everything you say and has continued to say has been a lie. Your life's a lie. The evidence shows.
Sir, I believe I've
You lied.
lied to you for years, and I've never done anything.
You continue to lie.
So it's going to be our evidence against your story of Jim
Jim,
and your story of the doctor.
Jim who told us what to do.
There's no Jim.
Nothing, sir, there is.
You didn't hurt Mindy, but yet you were telling Samantha back in September that your wife had died.
Yeah. In fall,
In September, you had already told another woman that your wife was dead.
sir, I never killed her.
So Jim told you to say that, you would say that?
No, sir.
Okay. So my point is, everything you do. If Jim told you to jump off a cliff, you were going to go jump off a cliff.
Yes, sir. For years we did exactly what Jim told us to do.
So
He wanted full access to our lives. He said he was keeping us safe.
Nick Kassotis was charged with Mindi Kassotis' murder. So why did Nick Kassotis murder his wife Mindi? Well, the answer to that is unclear. He pled not guilty. He always has denied actually murdering her, so we can just sort of try and guess as to why he did it. I mean, he would say he had no motive. He had no reason to kill Mindi. But the prosecution would say that the likely reason that she was murdered was that she was unable to have children, which was something Nick always wanted. So rather than divorce her and get saddled with another $1 million alimony that he was already on the run from, he came up with option number 2, which was murder. Nick went on trial in 2025, and he still continued to say that Jim McIntyre and that this mysterious group of evil people were likely the ones who had murdered Mindi Kassotis, and that he didn't dismember or kill her. No. It must have been Jim. It must have been Jim. Jim McIntyre was likely framing Nick for his wife's... Sure, Nick still believed that his wife had passed away of complications due to childbirth and had been cremated.
My client, Nick Kassotis, is not just an accomplished attorney and decorated JAG officer who served his country in Iraq and in the Pentagon. He is also a man who lived in fear. Relentless, all-consuming fear. His wife Mindi also lived in fear. Mr. Kassotis is accused of the unthinkable, the absolutely unthinkable, murdering his wife. But the truth, what really happened, is far more complex. Mr. and Mrs. Kassotis were told that they were targets. You will hear testimony that a man calling himself Jim McIntyre, who knows if that is his real name, claiming to be with the FBI, told them that their lives were in danger, that they had to disappear, follow orders without question, and trust no one. Not their family, not their friends, not their loved ones. Every move they made, every lie that they both told, every strange decision, and there were quite a few that you will hear about in testimony, were driven by that fear.
However, the prosecution said he was on the run from his ex-wife to whom he owed $1.5 million.
The question becomes why, right? And I'm going to submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that after 10 years as a decorated military veteran, Mr. Kassotis just leaves the Navy. But he leaves because he owes his first wife $1,500,000+, and the Navy is going to make him pay it.
Nick and Mindi lived off loans given by friends, stayed with family, and Nick gaslit Mindi and himself, it seems like at times, that some mysterious group was out to hurt them. The prosecution said the only person who could have killed Mindi was Nick. He was in the area where her body was found. He was seen buying items at the crime scene. Nick, though, said, nope. Sorry, guys, it was Jim. It was all Jim. Jim. And Nick seemed to say that it's Jim McIntyre. And though I can't prove he exists, you can't prove that he doesn't exist. So therefore, we're sort of at an impasse here. That's what he thought would work, I guess. Shit, that is sort of like the ultimate reverse Uno card.
In anticipation of today's date, you located Mr. McIntyre, right?
No, ma'am.
So you've been talking to him basically on and off since what, 2017?
I started talking to him in fall of 2017, I believe, and we last spoke in, I want to say, mid-April of 2023.
And the records for Apis Limited, you subpoenaed those records in anticipation of court, correct?
No, ma'am.
You know what a subpoena is as an attorney, right, sir?
I do, ma'am.
You hired a private investigator to find him?
No, ma'am. I hope the state would do that, but y'all didn't really care that much.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike.
As defenses go, it's not good, but it's interesting.
As totally insane as the Jim McIntyre story is, he has nothing to hide. He lived that Jim McIntyre story. He lived it. This isn't a fiction that the writer, Nick Kassotis, makes up upon arrest. I mean, he's good. He sold a story to Sony, but he's not that good. He's not that good that he could make up a story and then retroactively have lived it. He lived the Jim McIntyre story for years before the arrest, for years before Mindi Kassotis' murder. They actually lived like that. Mindi lived like that. Both Mindi and Nick told people the same story about security details. I don't know whether Mindi necessarily said Jim McIntyre, but they discussed it. They lived it. He didn't make it up later. So when he's arrested, and when Agent Sands and now Investigator Frost go up to Pennsylvania, go up to Lancaster County, and they want to speak to Nick Kassotis, he speaks to them. He doesn't have anything to hide. As a matter of fact, it seems to me he's trying to figure some things out. What's going on here? I thought my wife had died. I'm being arrested for her murder. This is nuts. This is this crazy Kafka-esque world that he is living in, or he is tormented, played with by someone calling themselves Jim McIntyre.
He wanted children. He wasn't getting there. He needed another option. First divorce didn't work out so good, did it? $1.6 million that he didn't have.
At the end of the trial, Nick Kassotis was found guilty of murder, of killing and dismembering his wife, Mindi Kassotis.
Mr. Kassotis, a jury of 12 citizens in Liberty County, Georgia, has now determined beyond a reasonable doubt that you are guilty of the offense of murder, along with 11 other counts. This jury has spoken very clearly. This case has revealed a level of depravity that truly shocks the conscience. To put together this elaborate scheme, this web of lies, creating this fictional character, Jim McIntyre, who does not exist. You wrote fiction, and your life was a fiction, at least the last 6 or 7 years. You carried out a brutal, horrific, gruesome murder of Mindi, someone who's been described by various witnesses as beautiful, kind, loving. You desecrated her body in such a vile way. This shows beyond all doubt that you have no conscience. Circumstances show an abandoned and malignant heart. That describes you.
Nick Kassotis, Nick Stark, Nick Morfox was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Nick Kassotis was more creative than Spielberg with the stuff he came out with, writing his little horror stories which then turned into true life. It's like he believed his own fiction. It's like he believed that Jim McIntyre, by the end of it, was a real person. He somehow gaslit his wife Mindi into believing that all of this was true. Now, unfortunately, we can't ask Mindi what she believed, what she thought was going on, but when speaking to her family, who they lived with for a good while, they lived with her family for a year and a half, they would say Mindi was scared. She was scared. She was so scared she wouldn't leave the house. So Mindi, it seems like, did believe somebody was out to get them, when the only person out to get her was the person she was sharing a bed with. Truly, this is a story of anything can be true if you believe hard enough. Maybe he believed Jim McIntyre was a tulpa, you know, basically a being imagined into existence. Turns out old Jimmy McIntyre was as real as Nick being a good writer, liar, or person. Sony bought the rights to this fictional horror story, but it turns out the man behind the story was far more interesting and far more horrifying. Thank you so much for watching this whole video, folks. You know, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. As always, if you're looking for some more of That Chapter, you can check out the That Chapter Patreon, where it's $2 a month, early access, ad-free, all videos, and there's a playlist of Patreon exclusive videos and a Patreon-only Discord. So give it a go. Or if you're looking for some more fresh stories, check out the That Chapter podcast, where every Monday morning there is a brand new podcast exclusive story. I know some of you guys had issues listening to it. It turned out there was something wrong with the prefix in the RSS. I don't know what that means either, but go check out the podcast if you're looking for some more That Chapter. But until the next still video, which will be up next week, please take care of each other and please take care of yourselves. Because I love you. Mike out.